Welcome to Safe Haven Sanctuary, your sacred space where we talk about all things conscious dating, creating harmonious relationships, self-worth, self-concept, and of course, spirituality. My name is Samantha, your host, your clinical counselor, and your spiritual guide. For those of you who don't know me, I have 10 plus years working in the clinical field of social services, where I have provided therapy to survivors of trauma. I currently provide trauma-informed therapy to one-on-one individuals and couples who are facing challenges within their relationships, helping them to transform their relationships into harmonious and loving and aligned ones, including the ones with themselves. Thank you so much for being here, from the bottom of my heart to yours, and let's get into this episode. So let's go ahead and jump right into this episode, and we are going to be talking about how to build trust within. And I'm going to give you a few tips here. Now, these are not concrete and set in stone. Take what resonates and leave what doesn't, and tap into your own soul, because as you are listening to this podcast, you're gonna find that you're gonna receive downloads. And if you're someone who's not really familiar with that term, what that means is you're going to receive messages from your higher self, from your higher power that you believe in while you're listening to this podcast. So take a seat, or if you're cleaning or running errands or whatever you're doing, just try to connect to your heart while you're listening. So let's get right into it. So the first thing on how to build trust within is becoming self-aware. And the way that we become self-aware is by becoming very honest with ourselves. And when I say honest, it doesn't mean that we always have to nitpick at everything that we see within ourselves that's quote unquote wrong. But I also want you to recognize what your strengths are. Recognize what your strengths are. Recognize where you're falling out of integrity as well. Also, reflecting on your childhood and what wounds may have surfaced and still continue to surface in your current life, and thinking about how you address these wounds. How do you address conflict? Are you able to honor your feelings while honoring both your truth and someone else's? Because again, we're going to tie this into relationships, especially romantic ones. I think that there's always this need to be right. And sometimes we're both right, sometimes we're both wrong, and it just depends on the perspective that you take, and it really depends on the experience that's happening for you, right? But I want you to know that you get to create and change your experiences as well too. Well, to a certain extent. So I want you to really reflect if you can honor both your truth and someone else's. And what regular patterns do you see that are helpful in your life? And what are the patterns you desire to change? This all has to do with becoming more self-aware, because with self-awareness, there's introspection, there's reflection. And it really involves taking a good deep look at the healthy, the unhealthy, and the neutral. That's all within you, right? And so when we can look at our patterns, our behaviors, what we desire to change, it's going to help us to get closer to a higher consciousness, right? And not just the routines and habits, but then when I say routines and habits, not just the physical routines and habits, but also the cognitive patterns, behavioral patterns, and physical patterns, and emotional patterns, and even spiritual patterns that we are engaging in. So I'd like you to reflect on those questions and ask yourself and be honest with yourself, and we can be honest with ourselves in a compassionate way, noticing, okay, these are the patterns that are coming up. This is what I'm noticing, and I'm going to love myself through this transition. Because I think that's where we lack a lot, is we're constantly self-criticizing, which creates a block between us and our consciousness, us and our higher self. So if we can move through coming closer to our self-awareness with compassion along with accountability, I think that is where the magic really happens. Okay. So the second thing I'd like us to talk about is acting with consciousness. So before we act with consciousness, we need to become self-aware, right? And that's why I put that as number one, becoming self-aware, because that's the first step in healing, understanding, acknowledging, and then taking aligned action, right? And so when we act with consciousness, it's one thing to have our self-awareness, okay? So we can have as much self-awareness and cannot be doing anything about it. I know I was there at one point, so no shame in that. But this is your sign to use your self-awareness to put into action what you want to see for yourself in your life, okay? So it's the coupling of self-awareness and the necessary action that is needing to be taken. So for example, if I'm aware that I have a hot temper and a conflict arises, an action of consciousness is to recognize that my emotions are elevating, okay? Possibly I'm taking myself out of the environment to allow myself to feel, because I think it's important to feel our anger, to feel our rage, okay? But to feel it in healthy ways, and then regulate the nervous system, return back to the situation that the conflict has arisen in, and coming back to what we call repair in relationships, so repairing the conflict. So once emotions have settled, then coming back to it so that you can move through the solution collaboratively with your partner, or if it's just a conflict that's risen within yourself, doing the same thing, treating yourself as a partner. You are your partner in life, literally. Like, there's no escaping this relationship with yourself. So it's really important to have a harmonious relationship with ourselves, because then it's going to translate into our other relationships. So you can use this example in the same way of like, okay, I'm fucking mad, I'm angry, I feel like lashing out. I'm going to feel my anger in a healthy way, and then I'm going to come back, I'm going to revisit it with myself. And maybe that looks like, so in a relationship, in a romantic relationship, that maybe looks like talking to the other person, coming up with collaborative solutions and actions on how to move forward. But maybe with yourself, it's going to look like, okay, yes, having a conversation with yourself, but taking the time to reflect and journal about what came up for you, how you want to move through it. Okay, the thoughts that you want to have, the actions and behaviors that you want to have in order to move through the situation. Okay, so that is an example of acting with consciousness. Okay, so we can act with consciousness within ourselves and even within our relationships. Okay, another example would be feeling as though maybe you're not good enough in life, in relationships, for family, for friends, whatever the story is. Okay, this is a story that your mind is telling you. Okay, a story that could have been derived from past experiences of rejection, neglect, cheating, and so on. But recognizing that the story is not true, the feeling is valid, because we don't want to leave our feelings unattended. Like I said, no matter what the feeling is, whether it's anger, sadness, happiness, joy, we want to tend to all of our feelings. Okay? If you take anything from this episode, take that, because this is coming from working 12 years in the social work field and being clinically and trauma informed around this. We need to feel our emotions, okay? We're not shoving them down. And I can do a whole different episode on like how to feel emotions in a healthy way, in a productive, not even productive, but in a way that is going to serve you. Okay. All right. So yeah. So say you're feeling all these feelings and you tend to them. And can you say to yourself, like, I understand why I'm feeling this way, but this is not the truth. I am not a result of my trauma. I'm not my trauma. I'm not worth being cheated on. I'm not rejection. I am not unworthy, whatever's coming up from you. Really saying those things out loud and in your mind is allowing your brain to say, okay, I'm not identifying with that. I'm choosing consciously. Okay, so this is, again, we're being conscious of what thoughts are coming up for us, what we're identifying with, okay? And actively choosing. And when I say actively, I'm not saying that, okay, you say these magic words and you're not going to identify with it. No, you need to persist in it. You need to continue to tell yourself that. Think about it. If you have grown up in an environment that was abusive, and maybe you've been told that you're not worthy, you're not worth it, or maybe you've just been made to feel like that, this builds up and becomes a feeling within you over time, because it's a programming, it's a conditioning, right? And then you start to feel like it's a part of your identity. So if that can happen in an unhealthy environment, you can also create healthy thought patterns, healthy beliefs for yourself. And I know that sounds easier said than done. I'm not saying that it's easy, but I am saying that there does require consistency, persistency. Is that a word? I don't know. We're going to use it as a word. It requires devotion too, to yourself, because if you give up on like the first week of telling yourself these thoughts, or of your healing journey, where it's like you're in therapy, and I'm just using this as an example, but say you're in therapy and it gets really hard, and like there's no shame in this, by the way, because this has happened to me before. I have bounced on my therapist. I have ghosted her. Like, this is early on in my journey. Now I look forward to these sessions, but I'm telling you this because it's about being aware. It's about being consistent, and it's about building these behaviors, building these skills, building new thought patterns, rewiring new neural pathways. Okay. So have compassion for yourself through this, but just remember to always come back to it. Okay. So again, this is not the truth. This is not a fact. You're not your trauma. You're not your pain. You're not your darkness. Okay. These things have happened to you, and I'm so sorry. I really am. And I know, trust me, I know I've been through the darkness, and it still comes up for me. These things still come up for me. And it's just a matter of reminding ourselves of who the fuck we are. Okay. So the act of consciousness here is challenging the self-harming thoughts, is basically what I'm trying to say, because we may have to implement these acts of consciousness over and over again until these new neural pathways are built in our mind. Okay, until we can fully feel it and embody it. Like, that's what it's all about. It's, some of us are so in our head, including myself, okay? And we forget about the embodiment part of, like, it's not just about the mindset work. It is about embodying it, living it. And sometimes we have to learn how to live in new ways. It's like going to the gym, right? At first it's hard to stay consistent, and then you keep pushing through because that it makes you feel good. Or maybe you have a goal and you're like, I'm gonna fucking complete this goal, I'm going to achieve this goal, and it requires consistency. It requires conscious decision making over and over to choose yourself, to choose your body. It's the same thing when it comes to healing. And it's about choosing your self-respect, choosing your self-worth, knowing what you deserve, right? And with consistency and persistency, like I said, it is inevitable. Okay, we just have to take that aligned action. We just have to. Okay. And I know it's hard, but that's why sometimes having support and having someone to hold you accountable, like a therapist or a coach or a mentor, is going to help you, not only with holding you accountable, but also with having someone to bounce things off of, having someone to help you process the emotions, having someone, like if you're someone who has only known unhealthy patterns in your life, like, I mean, how would you know healthy patterns? I know you can always use Google and stuff. I know I have, still do. But having someone in real time just talking to you and helping you move through those situations, and also even educating you, right? Like that's something that I do with my clients is, yes, it's about them sharing their truth, sharing their story and what's happening for them currently, but also it's really important to provide a space. I mean, for me at least, like it's really important for me to provide a space for my clients where they know that they can educate themselves and that I'm here to also educate them as well too, so that they feel empowered, so that they feel like they can create their own reality. They can create their life. They can recreate their story. They can rewrite their story. Okay. Let's move on to the next point, which is self-compassion, which is something that I touched on briefly, but I want to remind you that yes, you are a soul here on earth. You're a beautiful soul here on earth, and that is always within you. But you're also in a human body. Okay, the human body is complex. The human mind is complex. You are a human being and you will falter. Does that make you a bad person? Does it mean that you have regressed in your healing? No, not at all. Sometimes we have to falter to find new pathways. Sometimes we have to falter to finally understand that, wow, okay, like I can never be perfect, and that gets to be okay. And that's where self-compassion comes in. And people like when people are not perfect, by the way, because none of us are. Okay, even the people who try to put themselves out there as if they are, and it's not true. And I think it's important definitely to strive towards our goals, but to do it with a balance of self-compassion. Okay? Calling your power back in does not mean you need to be hard on yourself and shame yourself when you possibly fall back into old patterns. Your power also comes from self-compassion. Okay? So when we can have honest, transparent, and direct conversations with ourselves and hold space for self-compassion all at once, again, that is where the magic happens. Because if you're constantly holding a space for yourself where you're criticizing and beating down on yourself, listen, you've already had enough of that in your life. If you're listening to this podcast, I can guarantee you've probably had enough of that in your life. And you know what? You don't need any more of that criticism. What you need is to be taken care of. You need to be nurtured. And again, that is where your self-compassion comes in. And you get to use self-compassion as a superpower. Okay? And so when we can have all these things at once, the accountability and the self-compassion, we get to hold space for others in that way. We get to see life from a different perspective too. Okay? And so life is about learning from our quote-unquote mistakes. I don't like to use that word mistakes. I think every experience is an experience, a learning curve. Okay, but really, like I said, nothing's a mistake. It's a lesson. So be kind to yourself throughout your process. And when you have self-compassion, you're going to be able to trust yourself that even in those times where you falter or make those quote-unquote mistakes, or the outcome is not what you intended it to be or what you wanted it to be, you're going to be so deeply rooted into your self-trust through that compassion for yourself that you're going to be okay with whatever the outcome is. Or maybe you're going to come to acceptance with what the outcome is and reshift or pivot. Okay? So self-compassion is very important when building on self-trust. Okay, because let me just bring up one more point. Like, say you're telling someone about something that you weren't so proud of, and they just start criticizing you. Are you going to trust them? No, you're probably not going to tell them anything ever again because you felt judged and you felt misunderstood. You didn't feel heard. So it's the same thing with building trust within when you are providing compassion and non-judgment from yourself. Okay, because your inner thoughts they really do affect how you trust yourself. Okay. So a question I have for you for this third point is, how can you be more compassionate with yourself? And I want you to think of scenarios that come up for you regularly of like, okay, this happens for me. I usually respond with self-criticism. How can you shift self-criticism into self-compassion? Okay, and I can give you a little example of like, okay, say you wake up one morning and you're like, shit, like I don't feel like going to the gym. I know I should go, but I don't really feel like it. And whatever, you're like, I'm not going. Okay. I have two answers for this. One, like you have to listen to your body. Two, and that's having self-compassion. You can say, okay, like I'm going to take the day off today, but I'm going to go tomorrow. Okay, I'm still going to complete my goal. I'm going to still go, 4 to 5 times a week. I'm just going to maybe shift my schedule. And I'm going to allow myself to have a moment. Okay, because you're not a robot. You're a human being with a heart, with a nervous system, with feelings, with a mind. Okay, so that would be having self-compassion. Okay, so use that as an example. And you can translate this into other aspects of your life too when it comes to self-compassion. Okay, let's move on to the last point. Number 4 is keeping commitments to yourself and building on your self-trust through the commitments that you make. If you have told yourself you're going to do something, it's important that you follow through on it. LOL, how contradictory is this to my last point? Okay, we're gonna go deeper into this. Hear me out, okay? So, when I talk about commitments, like what I'm talking about is, self-respect. So, for example, if you have a commitment to yourself, like, okay, like I'm gonna always act through self-respect. I want you to stay true to that 100% all the time. Okay, if you falter, it's okay. Just come back to it. But keeping a commitment is just so important, okay? Now, in regards to my last example, I used the gym as an example, okay? So if you are constantly like, I don't want to go to the gym and I'm going to do it the next day, like I don't encourage that, okay? I just want to clarify that. But, your commitments and following through on it equals consistency, and consistency equals trust, right? Like, think about it. When you are dating someone and they're saying like, hey, I'm gonna pick you up at 7, we're gonna go on a date and, like be ready. And then they don't show up or they cancel on you constantly. They're not keeping their commitment to you. That is going to build, or I should say that's going to create a lack of safety, a lack of trust. So I want you to treat yourself as if you're dating yourself and keep those commitments. Okay, because this means that you believe in yourself. When we keep our commitments, when you trust yourself, when you fully honor yourself, this means that you are anchored into your self-trust, right? It also means that you're respecting yourself. Sometimes, there's commitments that we have and we don't want to do them, right? But we know that if we do it, like, we're going to feel better. We know that if we do it, that it's going to benefit our mental health. We know that if we do it, it's going to just benefit us in any way. So for example, I'll just give you another one, eating healthy, right? If we constantly are making commitment to eat healthy and we choose the healthier option, then we're telling our bodies that we honor it, that we love it, that we're going to nurture it, we're going to take care of it. And I want you to translate this into all aspects of your life. Even when it comes to mindset work, when it comes to healing. If you say, I'm going to journal tonight because I just feel heavy, do that if you know that that's what's going to help you. If you say, I'm going to go to therapy, or I'm going to sign up for therapy, I want to do it because I know that I have a lot to work through. I know it's going to help me. And I know there might be fear under that, and that's okay. But do it anyway. Make these big commitments to yourself that you know that you need to. Because through your commitments, your life is going to change. If I was not committed to myself and my healing journey and the healing journey of others, I would not be where I am today. The amount of transformation that I've gone through in the last 10 years has been immense. And it's because of the commitment I had. And I'm not saying that it was easy. There's times where I faltered from my commitment, where I fell off for a little bit. But I always came back. And that's the key thing, is keeping your commitments. If you fall off, okay, bring in that self-compassion and get right back onto that commitment. Treat it as a vow. If you were in a marriage with someone and you made a vow to love them through sickness and in health, make that vow to yourself too. Okay. So creating safety within yourself through commitments, that's a huge one. Okay. And you can apply this to your romantic relationships as well. I gave you a really good example of the dating thing. So let's switch it up. I gave you a sort of a negative example. Say someone says, hey, I'm going to pick you up at 7. And they show up at 7 and they continue to model this behavior where they say things and they follow through on it. They're keeping their word. 100% you're going to feel safe with them. You're going to be like, yo, this person, everything that they say to me, everything that they promise, everything that they commit to, they follow through on it. And maybe it's not always 100% of the time, because we can't always be 100%. Sometimes things come up, but how we move around that commitment, around that communication. So the example I gave you, okay, I usually go to the gym at this time every day. Okay, maybe I'm going to just sleep in a little bit more, and maybe I'm going to go later. Or maybe I'm going to take the day off, and maybe I'm going to go tomorrow. And that's the same thing, in relationships too. Maybe the person, something came up for them at work and they have to stay back or something. And they're like, hey, I can't make it today, but I still want to see you and I miss you. Can we reschedule? And they reschedule and they commit to a time and a date. To me, that is trust. Trust in a relationship, trust in yourself. It's really beautiful how these two things of commitment to yourself and commitment to another in a relationship, and how these behaviors are so intertwined and how we reflect these things. Okay. So be the commitment that you want to receive and build that self-trust, and you're going to start to trust other people as well too. The right people. Okay. You're going to feel safe with them. You're going to trust them, and you're going to see your life transform. So these are just 4 simple, basic tips for you to build trust within, and they can also be applied in your relationships. How multifaceted is this episode? Oh, wow. Anyway, if you have any questions or you want to leave a comment in the comments, let me know how you build trust within yourself. Let me know what resonated with you. Send me a DM on Instagram and tell me how this resonated with you. You can find me on Instagram at safehavensanctuary_. Or if you feel called to work with me one-on-one, because I am accepting new clients, you can go ahead to my website at www.samanthasafehavensanctuary.com and you can book a free consult with me. My loves, I know this journey on building trust within and healing can be challenging, but I want you to know that you got this. You have all the tools, all the wisdom within yourself. It's just about devoting yourself, dedicating yourself, staying true to you, always acting through self-respect, working towards a higher consciousness, and having that accountability, self-compassion, and keeping commitments to yourself. Okay? I have enjoyed sharing all this with you and spending time with you. It's such an honor. Thank you so much for being here, for listening all the way through, and I can't wait to share what's next. Have a beautiful rest of your day or your evening whenever you're listening to this, and I am just sending you deep love from my heart to yours. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode and spending time with me. It is truly my honor. Please be sure to follow me on Instagram at safehavensanctuary_, or you could go to my website and book a free consult call at www.samanthasafehavensanctuary.com. Remember, I provide therapy to one-on-one clients and couples who are looking to harmonize and align their relationship with their desires, their worth, and everything that they're dreaming of.